Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say, staying happy and healthy and all that good stuff. In this video, I got some stories for you, so it's more of a compilation of smaller stories that I found, instead of one story taking up the whole video. So, pull up a stump, as always, and let's jump into the video. Thank you for watching. My girlfriend and I recently visited my family in Oregon. She hadn't met my parents yet, and we both wanted a break from the city, so we decided, why not? Let's have some fun in the country. My parents offered to let us stay in their guest house on Mount Hood. I declined and suggested to my girlfriend that we stay at a hotel instead. She is a fan of the paranormal, and I knew that she'd enjoy a stay in my hometown's famously haunted hotel. In fact, you can thank her for this story. She convinced me to tell it. To my surprise, she wanted to stay in my family's guest house. I told her I'd rather not, and I'd rather we didn't, and when she pressed as to why, I cobbled together some poor excuse about mountain lion problems on the property. So, a week had gone by, and my girlfriend still wanted to make the trip. My parents understood my reservations with the guest house, but felt that I should grow up and get over the issues I had with the place, and if we would be staying in the guest house, I would have to come clean to my girlfriend about it. So on the drive to Oregon, I told her about my summer that the family spent in the guest house, trying to cure my uncle of lycanthropy. I hope this story is relevant to your interests. On June 19th, my parents received a phone call in the middle of the night. They came into my room, woke me, dressed me, and loaded me into the back of the car. They told me that my Uncle Red would be in town and that we'd be spending the summer camping. My parents' house is roughly a 45-minute drive along Highway 45 to their guest house on Mount Hood. The guest house is what it's called now, but it had been the home to my grandparents, where they lived and raised their kids. They left the house to their kids, who shared it amongst themselves in the form of a guest house/vacation home for family members visiting from out of state, or for anyone who wanted to spend the weekend at Timberline Lodge skiing. I had fallen asleep on the drive to this house, but woke up to my aunt, not Red's wife, he was single, opening the door and unbuckling me. My two other uncles sat on the front steps, both smoking and animated while they talked to my parents. My aunt led me past them to around the back French doors which opened into the kitchen. The doors to the family room had been closed and chained. From what I could hear, people yelling and the cries of my uncle while he pleaded for help. His voice cracked. He stuttered and choked while he cried for someone to do something. My aunt locked us in one of the upstairs rooms, along with her two kids, who sat in the corner of the room by the fireplace crying. My aunt reassured us that everything would be okay, that Uncle Red is just sick and he'd be better tomorrow. The sounds my uncle were making, like the screaming and crying, kept us all awake. We finally fell asleep once the sun came up. I didn't sleep long though. I woke up to an empty room and the smell of breakfast and the sounds of my family talking downstairs. I got out of bed and made my way into the kitchen. I felt like I had awakened from a bad dream, like the sounds from last night hadn't happened at all. My family sat around the table, laughing and eating, and I mean everyone. Uncle Red leaned against the island drinking his coffee and talking with my dad. I had no idea what had happened. Tired and confused with the situation, I broke down and cried. My mom scooped me up and carried me back upstairs. Lycanthropy means different things to different people, but to me, it meant that once a month my uncle would get sick, and sometimes he'd be so sick that my family needed to chain him to a post so he wouldn't hurt himself or anyone else. My mom took me upstairs and explained this to me in a more child-friendly manner. She sat me down and established the rules of the house. These rules only applied at night. Once the sun started to set, the kids had to be brought inside and taken upstairs. We were to keep the bedroom door locked, but should open it for anyone other than Uncle Red. Don't go outside unsupervised, and no matter how much Uncle Red begs, we must not unchain him from the post. Now, not every night would be the same for Uncle Red. Some nights I'd wake up to the sounds of him screaming and howling, the panicked yells of my parents and uncles, and other nights would be quiet and peaceful. None of us knew what would trigger the urges in him, and I don't honestly think that he knew either. For the most part, I don't even think he remembered much of what happened when the quote, wolf brain took over. But once he described the pre-blackout feeling to my mom as being like a bubbling sensation. I feel bad now looking back on the situation, because we would avoid talking or looking at Uncle Red. He scared us, and neither my cousins nor I knew how to process our feelings about him. Until that summer, a visit from Uncle Red meant fishing trips, hiking, fun in the great outdoors. But this changed everything, and Uncle Red knew that. The longer we stayed in the guest house, the more withdrawn from us he'd become. I don't think we realized the true effect this would have on him until the 4th of July. The 4th of July would be the first night that we'd stay out past sundown. My Uncle Dan had made a supply run into town and brought back fireworks. Nothing big or showy or anything like that, just small ones. Uncle Red, though, spent most of the day to himself, assuring everyone that he felt fine, better than he'd felt since he got here. Night came and Uncle Dan got out the fireworks. We had polished off a pack of whistling Pete's with my aunt, and we lost sight of Uncle Red. While everyone had been preoccupied, he managed to slip off into the woods. My aunt gathered my cousins and I together while everyone else searched for him. My aunt led us into the house, through the front door and towards the stairway. Uncle Red had come in through the back French doors and was hunched over, pawing at his head. We ran upstairs and locked the door behind us. Huddled in the corner of my aunt's bed, we listened to Uncle Red scratch at the door. He'd mumble and groan before he would slam himself against the door. His moans and whimpers devolved into screams. The rest of the family heard the sounds and rushed inside. Soon Uncle Red was detained and tied back to his post. I left the house the next day. My parents sent me to stay with some friends who had moved out of town, and I was not to talk about my time in the guest house. I haven't seen Uncle Red since, and to be honest with you, I have no interest. I think the wolf in Uncle Red's brain meant to eat us that night. My girlfriend and I stayed in the house, and so much time had passed that I barely recognized it. The family had redecorated the whole house and had begun renting it out to skiers. I still don't know how I feel about my experience, but writing this has helped me process things a bit better. I hope wherever my uncle is now that he's safe and protected. When I was 15, I was going to this rich private school in a desert state in the US. I'm American. The school is super old, and there used to be a Catholic church on the grounds. The main offices are still there, but the chapel is not. And there's always these rumors about there being a cemetery on the grounds. So I get curious and I decide to do some digging. It turns out the church hasn't been there for decades. And at that point I think there's definitely a cemetery on these school grounds. But for me, my curiosity isn't satisfied yet. So I do some more digging and I find an old photo of the church in late 1950. And off to the side I see gravestones. And jackpot, I think. I wait until the weekend and make my move. I grab a few friends and we make our way to the school. And at the time I lived in the middle of nowhere in the desert, so it's really cold at night. And we get to the school and head over to where the gravestones were in the photo. It turns out it's on what's now our soccer field, and we're all like, we are so screwed if we get caught doing this. But we start digging, and we had to stop a few times because there was cops out on patrol, but eventually we dig deep enough until one of us puts his shovel and we hear it crack. We just broke a femur. And I'm thinking, oh, we are so cursed. This is terrible. And two of us get kind of rowdy over this, so the cops come back due to the noise that we've been making, and we book it. So the next week rolls around and we get to school, and there's police tape all around the hole. There's an announcement in the homeroom that detectives will be coming by to talk to us and ask questions. There's rumors going around that they think the bones are recent. And I'm thinking that I'm going to jail for life or whatever my 15-year-old brain thought. I had mega anxiety at the time. Nothing happens until a month later. There's school canceled out of the blue one day, and we're like, alright, cool, day off. So I have my friend whose mom works in the administration office, and she hears that the detectives are talking to the principal almost daily, and there's no school for a whole week. And one day we walk by the campus to see what's going on, and we hear what sounds like a construction site where we were digging. We meet with the admin office, like my friend's mom, and she tells me that the feds are involved. The feds basically excavating the field. School went back to normal next week, and the field was also pretty much back to normal. The students who asked or tried to find out anything were immediately suspended, and we heard that the principal had either been arrested or resigned. Only one time did anything happen to me that was ever strange in any way. This made me realize that our world has many secrets or untold or unknown things. I'll try to keep it as basic as possible. So it was 1997, and I was like 7 years old or something, just playing SNES in my room. Suddenly, all the dogs in the neighborhood start going crazy, howling like they never have before. My stepfather thinks that there's a criminal around, and that's why they're all freaking out. Suddenly, a frantic bang at our door. It's the neighbor lady. She was going to check in on her mom across the street. Her mom was very old, so I fed the cats as a chore on the weekends, while the daughter was at work, so I had a spare key. I went with my mom and my neighbor to see if the old woman was doing okay. The lights in the living room worked, but nothing else. We went inside the old woman's room. I stood by the door, just looking in. The daughter tried talking to her mom, but there was no response. Suddenly, as the daughter started to feel for a pulse, the mother gave a big gasp and said something. I couldn't hear what it was, but later my mom told me that she said, "He's here." I looked where she was looking. Everyone was. And there was this dark shadow by the window opposite the bed. I suddenly smelled the weird smell of like stale cigarettes. It went away as I watched the shadow fade, and it wasn't shaped like a man, but just like a vaguely human caricature. After that, she slowly turned her head and then silence. All the dogs stopped howling right then. We called the ambulance after, and that was that. I was told that the old woman had an abusive husband who smoked like a chimney. The daughter believed that he was there that night. He died from a motorcycle accident in 1982. So, what do you think of those stories? Do you think they were real, or do you think they were all fake, or do you think they were somewhere in between? Let me know down here in the comments. And if you want to do me a real big favor, then you can like and share the video and all that good stuff. And yeah, thank you for pulling up a stump, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching, as always.